So, hello everybody, I'm Katie Brown and I manage the Central Complaints, Comments and Compliments team for West Northampton Council. So, without talking myself out of a job, I'm going to tell you a bit about the journey we've been on, which started when we became a unitary council back in 2021. And these were the challenges that we were facing at the time, with a real need to try and centralise our process. So we were 4 councils coming into one, all with different cultures, different systems, different ways of working. The one thing we had established prior to becoming West Northampton Council was our single complaints policy, which was customer facing. But we still had all these different channels of feedback coming into different places, and we hadn't really established our own culture and our own West ways of working at that point. There was also only one authority that had any complaints resource. So that helped in a way because we had our central team, but we had 4 different systems, 2 of which were a Jadu solution. So that was where we started. So the challenge for our customers really at that point was recognising which authority they belonged to. We suddenly had a lot of new service delivery, a lot of new staff. They didn't necessarily know where to go. And they didn't necessarily understand the relationship with our partners either. So that could be our housing, our waste partners, or our children's social care trust. Resolvers working in the services, staff dealing with complaints were struggling because they were working to old processes, they were working in silo. They kind of knew who their old customer base was, but now they were dealing with different people and encountering some interesting personalities that they might not have met before as well. And in the complaints team, we were really struggling. We were trying to establish that new culture, a new way of working, but we didn't have that single view of the customer. And we knew that complaints were generating complaints because they weren't being handled properly elsewhere in the services. And the other big concern for us was that we couldn't ensure compliance with our own policy that we'd created jointly prior to becoming unitary. And we couldn't confidently report on customer feedback because we weren't sure that we had that full picture. And our customer services colleagues, we were the back office function, if you like, our customer service colleagues on the front line were struggling to signpost people correctly. They weren't always entirely clear about what was going to happen with that complaint and who was going to own it and where it was going to be dealt with. And they needed to be able to take information quickly and help identify the journey for the customer so that they could give confidence in the matter being dealt with. So they were all the problems that we needed to solve and find a solution for. The channel shift Louisa touched on had already kind of happened overnight with COVID. So 90% of our feedback was coming in via email or online. And actually at the point in 2021 where we became unitary, the majority of it was through our online form. So our experience in the centralised team was that we had a system that we were using, but it was isolated database. It was very admin heavy, and we were still doing a lot of work outside of the system through Outlook, chasing people, trying to find out whether we'd sent something to the right place, trying to get that accountability and ownership so we could give confidence that the complaint was going to be dealt with in the right time and in line with our policy. So that was the need for centralisation. We needed one system that gave us a single view of the customer, that we could be confident that the case was logged and tracked, that we had the ownership from the service the other end, and that customer was going to get a timely response in line with the procedure. So we called on our lovely colleagues in the DTI project team. It would have been easier to move in with each other at one point.
We spent a lot of time together. Really, I shouldn't take all of the credit for this because Alex, who's hiding at the front here, she was our awesome project manager that whipped us into shape. But just to give you a general idea of what we were dealing with, so you can see here about nearly 6,000 complaints that we were receiving. Is that yearly? Was this? I want to say.
Yeah.
Every year. Around 117 various departments. And when I say departments, they're not just the directorates. We've got individual services that people are complaining about. and then around sort of 121 officers dealing with those different complaints. And we wanted a way to be able to see from start to finish what happens with that customer complaint, and if at any point the customer does contact us, we can give them an update on what's going on. So we actually split this out into 4 phases. So phase 1, if I can remember now, that was our corporate and adults. And that was just focusing on just the stage 1 and stage 2. So when we say corporate and adults, that's the West Northampton sort of main complaints that we receive, and with our adult services.
I think colleagues that deal with complaints in the room will know as well that that brings its own complexities, because you're managing different complaints procedures. So you'll have your general corporate customer feedback for the wider council services, but then you've got statutory elements within the social care complaints policies that you've got to ensure that you're compliant with, and will perhaps take you in a different direction to your normal customer feedback.
100%. And it was that phase 1 where we mapped out exactly how we wanted this to work in Jadu. So we essentially built a workflow, which Katie will come on to next, just to show you those major improvements that we made. But we took all of that learning and took that into phase 2, where we were working with our Northampton Partnership Homes team. So they deal with all of our housing. They're an arm's length management organisation. And again, they deal with complaints very, very differently to what we do. So it was trying to align all of that together. And to add to it, we also had the LGSO, the code change?
Yeah, the new practice code, yeah.
I think it was a week before we were due to build in our systems. We didn't actually know what the result of the code was going to be. So that could have completely changed our whole entire process. Luckily, we made some very well-educated guesses. But yeah, that was a big impact. Where we are at the moment is we're currently working actually on both phase 3 and phase 4 at the same time. So phase 3 is MPs, councillors, comments and complaints. For those of you that deal with MPs and councillors, you probably realise that you get a lot of queries coming through for them. So again, we're just trying to channel that into one area so we can keep an eye and see what's going on. And phase 4 is children's, but also we're including reporting. So Jadu itself, it has got the where you can export CSV files. But one thing that we have been looking at is linking that up to a visual database. So what I'm hoping is Katie can just at any point log onto a visual dashboard and see how many complaints I've had for adults, what we mainly receive then complaints about, so we can actually start doing that trend analysis and trying to make them changes in the service. I'm now going to pass back over to Katie, who's actually going to talk about what we've actually changed.
Yeah. So obviously the other important thing there that Megan's touched on that we're really excited to get to is that reporting offer to the wider business as well, so that managers can have that single view of what's active in their own area and what their customers are telling them. And we're on the right road, I think, at the moment. And we've also talked about partners there as well. So we manage through different service level agreements complaints for some of our partners, in particular the Children's Trust, which carries the statutory element as well. And it was important for us that we had a view of our customers that were in receipt of those contracted services as well, so that as the local authority, we were ultimately accountable for that service delivery, and we could see, without waiting on reports, what the customers were telling us about those services. So what the overall aim is to create that single process where we have the accountability built into the workflow. It was really important to us that we had the functionality for officers to accept the complaint, so we weren't getting them back at the 11th hour telling us, oh, this isn't for us, which probably sounds familiar to some people in the room. So it comes into us through our web form, it doesn't matter where the complaint has come in. It could be to the customer service advisor, it could be to made in one of the welcoming spaces, but our form feeds directly into our team to triage. It's already established in the system, so that initial data capture of who our customer is and what we want to know about them is already there in the system for us. And we've obviously been able to make some of the information requirement mandatory, so that we can make sure that we get all the information we need to deal with the complaint as quickly as possible without the need for lots of repeat contact. So it comes into us, we triage, we allocate into the right process, to the right department, and then we've created a role within the service areas, which we've referred to as resolvers, but they are our advocates really for on the receiving end of that workflow. And that's been a really helpful role for us to have within each of the directorates, because they're pushing that culture and the standardisation of the process as well, as the advocates in their area. So we're starting to see the consistency and improvement in the quality of responses as well, because we're able to influence that through the central team. Once they receive the complaint, they triage it, they either accept it or decline it. If they decline it, then they need to tell us why, so that we've got that bit of learning embedded and we can make sure that we're redirecting it to the most appropriate person to respond. The case will then go into different statuses, so whoever is looking at that record, if it's a customer service advisor or one of my officers, we know what status that complaint is at. Once they've accepted it, it will go into their queue, into their workflow, and it's then with them, and the timescales are set and tracked. The reminders come through to us and to them, so we're still keeping a visual check on what's due. And if we need to, we can give people a nudge. And there are different escalation rules built into that process. So if we need to, we can alert their manager that they need to get on and deal with the complaint. We have also built in the request for extension, because there is an additional amount of time allowed within the policy. But it's allowing us to track why those extensions are needed. So we can see if there's resource pressures, if somebody's just needs a bit more support or training to deal with complaints, and we're starting to sort of see that come through our performance information now. They can deal with the complaint, add notes themselves, and then upload their responses and any additional information at their end, and then it will go into a case responded status. And the other big thing for us, and there's a huge onus on this amongst complaints handlers, is to catch that learning from complaints. So we do have a form built into Jadu which will capture that learning. So the resolver uploading the response needs to be able to evidence the action taken, what resolution they've offered, if there was any wider learning that they want to capture for their service area or a service improvement suggestion, and that all goes into that form, so it's reportable. We can share that with managers periodically as well. And then it goes into the case closed status. So by standardising that initial data capture, we've really improved our reporting, because we're starting to get a picture of who our customers are. We can start to see where we've got repeat customers or vulnerable customers that perhaps need a bit more support. And it's given a bit more accountability and empowerment to our customer service advisors as well, because they can capture a complaint there and then on the phone, or help a customer to go through the web form to do that in real time, and it's straight into the system. So they'll get their acknowledgement and their reference number straight away, and can be clear about what the next steps are. Yeah, so the biggest measure of success really for my team has been the fact that it's released capacity. We've got rid of a lot of the heavy admin that we were dealing with before. The increase in the centrally recorded feedback has been huge, but that hasn't felt daunting. It's reassuring, I think, now that we're getting the full picture of what our volumes look like and who our customers are, and we're starting to close the loop. So Rate This Page is a good example. As soon as you give customers another route to have a go or share their feedback, you're going to get it, but that will channel them into the complaints form. So we're starting to close the loop and bring all that customer insight into one place. It's allowed us to redefine the resources in our team. So Louisa touched on the triangle of needs, and actually it's given us more time to concentrate now on the training and guidance and establishing better responses, looking at some of the service improvement stuff that we perhaps previously weren't able to do because we just didn't have the capacity within the team. and also giving a more dedicated service to those customers that are vulnerable or need some kind of reasonable adjustments to support them through the complaints process. We've been able to increase our support to the business because we've been able to take over other customer inboxes that were perhaps out there, and that now gets channeled into one place. We've managed to reduce the need for some of our legacy systems and licenses, so there's been a cost saving there. And we had a very dodgy sort of unsupported system that was hanging on. I don't think it even had a maintenance contract, but we've been able to get rid of those, so we're finding one solution. And there's now a much greater confidence in the reporting accuracy, and you can kind of see I've just put some loose figures in there for they were pursued complaints only, but you can see that that's starting to creep up. And I think I'd say to colleagues that do manage complaints, that's something not to be afraid of when you go on this journey, because your volumes are going to go up, but actually it's really valuable information. And it is starting to support other bits of work around how we support the channel shift. What are we actually getting? Is it all complaints? Is there something else we can do through website improvement or form improvement to try and reduce the amount of feedback that some services are getting? And I would say about the Rate This page that it actually hasn't increased our complaints volumes. So just to reassure you that we've put that there as a channel so we can capture it and we don't dismiss anyone's right to complain, but that hasn't actually been realised in more complaints. So there was obviously a need for that feedback about the content, which all feeds into the same project.
That's it, yeah. Fab. So it's just next steps really now. So we need to finish all of our final phases, which I believe is due by the end of this year. Yes, by the end of this year. Financial year. So by the end of this financial year, everything should now all be in the one system, which is then when we can really start looking at all of them reporting elements and starting to see where we can make them improvements and improve the customer journey overall. And one of the biggest things I think we want to look at is linking it up with the My Account. There's a lot of situations where customers might want to provide updates, or we may request for further information from the customer. We have sight of the complaint. There's no reason why a customer shouldn't. So we want to start looking at utilising that My Account that is within the Jadu platform, so customers can have a bit more of an understanding of what's going on and an overview.
I think we're really interested in what that means for members as well, particularly because that's the phase that we're in at the moment. So councillors and MPs being able to go on and track their own casework, and we can provide real-time updates to them through the account as well. The other important thing to mention when I've touched on volumes, and it's because it's something we're proud of as well, but even though the volumes are increasing because we're closing the loop and bringing all that feedback into one place, we've managed to maintain quite a low escalation rate for complaints. And I think that is because we've had the time to dedicate then to creating the standard around West ways of working and what we expect to see from complaints. And because we've got that resolver role in the service, that's allowing us to work with them around the quality assurance and the sign-off of complaints as well, and what a meaningful resolution looks like. And that's particularly important when it comes to obviously the Ombudsman and the accountability that they expect from the local authority as well. So,
Well done.
Thank you. Any questions about complaints?